Hey guys, thanks for watching again. Welcome back to the channel. Today I have with me Carolina from OneSkin, and we're gonna talk about an exciting topic. Maybe more so for women than for men, but since I'm involved, there is also an angle I think for men here, and that is skin health, right? And what you can do to improve the appearance of your skin and to slow down the aging process, the natural aging process. I mean, we all aging. There is not much we can do to completely prevent that, but there are certain things we can do lifestyle wise and supplements wise to either repair some damage or slow down some of the aging. And so, Karina, I'm gonna hand it over to you here real quick to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background? How you got into the area of researching skin health and skin aging, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael. And we'll come back to that, but I know that, this subject is still primarily of interest of women, but in fact, the men should, be as interested as women if you're looking to achieve your best health, because obviously skin is our largest organ and it does impact our overall health. So we'll talk more about that. But a little bit more about myself. I'm a scientist by training. I got my PhD in stem cell biology and tissue engineering. And I was always interested in science with the aim of translating science in order to create a product or a treatment that would improve people's lives, improve the quality of life, and hopefully cure disease or prevent diseases. And as I got with time to understand more about aging biology and the impact that researching aging or slowing down aging can have in our lives, I basically, I found my, purpose, that instead of trying to cure a disease when we're already sick, why we don't, target aging in the first place and prevent the diseases that comes with the aging process. So that's how, I got really passionate about this field. And we come from an expertise in which we can replicate tissues in the lab, and skin is one of the, I would say, easiest tissues to grow in the lab. And that's why we started with skin. With skin, we can have these models that can replicate the human skin, and we can replicate the skin aging. And then we thought that would be a great starting point to test those, interventions to slow down aging and eventually transform this into a product that we could bring to people in the market.
Funny, when I don't know who it was who reached out to me. I think it was Chen, and that was a while ago already, many months ago. And she pitched me the idea of this, lotion and I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm the right target, because I use butter on my lips, if I have chappy sticks, so I'm very simplistic when it comes to my skincare. But one thing that caught my attention was she mentioned, I think, cell senescence, and it was right around the time when I published an article about aging and what I do to try to slow down aging from a systemic perspective. And cell senescence was one of those hallmark signs of aging. I'm like, ooh, this is interesting because, for once, because I'm interested in all of those, processes and how to slow them down or reverse them. But also because with the skin, you can see results relatively quickly. If you do something systemic, figuring out if your cell death rate has been reduced, or some of the things are very difficult to really figure out and to test for. But with the skin, you can see it because it's on the outside, right? And that was one of the reasons why I got interested. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this test. I'm gonna try it out and see if it makes a difference. And so let's maybe talk a little bit about those hallmark signs of aging. What happens in the body and specifically in the skin as you age, and what is normal aging, and what are some of the factors that can either, I guess, speed that up or slow that process down from a lifestyle perspective.
Yes, sure. So basically there are what we call extrinsic factors and intrinsic factors that drive aging. So extrinsic factors are everything related to our environment. So obviously UV exposure, pollution, different types of environmental stressors. And intrinsic aging is basically, your biology of like time passing, your cells replicating, the inflammation that your body is going to produce. So the combination of this, obviously leads to aging. And what the science of, aging and longevity has discovered in the past like few years is that there are initially were 9 hallmarks of aging. Now we are calling already 12. But there is one that we see as a central hallmark of aging because it's basically interconnected with all the other hallmarks. So you probably have heard of, telomere shortening or, epigenetic instability. So these are all hallmarks of aging. And there is this new topic of like cellular senescence that, again, has been, considered the main driver of aging. And what cellular senescence is. Basically, a senescent cell is a cell that have, replicated around 50 times, so have already accumulated a lot of mutations. And with that, the cells stop replicating because otherwise it could become a cancer. So this is kind of a mechanism of, defense from our own body, which is good. The problem is that our body usually clears out those senescent cells, throughout our lives. But as we age, our, immune system also reduces its ability to, clear out those cells, and they start to build up. And the flip side of senescent cells is that they start secreting inflammatory signals that basically induce like healthy cells to age faster or to become senescent. So we like to compare a senescent cell, or maybe I should use zombie cell, that's an easier term, with a bad apple in a basket. So one senescent cell will basically spoil the good cells, and they will always start like to create inflammation, and that inflammation will cause, tissue degeneration. So in the skin, one of the main, factors that impact the accumulation of senescent cells is obviously UV damage. So we can simulate this in the lab. We expose skin cells to UV simulator or like a, sun simulator. And we can clearly see that the higher the dose of UV, the higher the number of senescent aged cells that we are forming. And what we found then is like a novel peptide that's able to reduce the accumulation and the formation of novel, senescent cells. So what this peptide does, it increases the ability of our cells to repair damage, because in the end, aging is all about like how much damage you create and how much your bodies are able to repair. And eventually bodies, cannot catch up with the amount of damage. And our peptide basically boosts this ability of our own cells to repair damage. So in the end, you don't get to form that amount of aged cells, and then you reduce the overall inflammation, and this allow your skin again to proliferate and to produce more collagen, and leads like to a stronger skin barrier, which is really important for the function of the skin. And also, a better, like a youthful looking, because a biologically younger skin also, looks better, looks healthier.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned something interesting, that is UV damage. There is obviously, if you ask a dermatologist, they would tell you, okay, never get out in the sun, always wear sunscreen. First thing in the morning, put on sunscreen. I started doing the exact opposite, and my skin looks better as a result. But that doesn't necessarily mean that UV damage isn't real. But I think there is a lot of dietary factors and maybe other lifestyle factors that can determine the resilience of your skin and make it more susceptible to UV damage. Whether or if you do something else. So for example, I've noticed that by cutting out all seed oils, vegetable oils, PUFAs in particular, I've become much more resilient to UV light. So I can be out in the sun for a couple of hours without even getting red. Before, I was one of those guys, always in the shade with a long sleeve shirt, never be exposed to sun because I would burn immediately.
Yeah.
And that is, I've noticed that changing. And also, I've also noticed that by using certain hormetic stressors like red light therapy, it also makes the skin more resilient, right?
Yeah.
To UV light.
Yeah. So all of this is in the end is related like with how your skin reacts to the insult, right? So if
Right.
your skin is better equipped, they will react in a much more efficient way and not in like in a stressed way. And this is usually related to inflammation that you have in your own body. So very sensitive skin, for example, these are people that have either like a weaker skin barrier, and that's why sometimes even like pathogens or whatever pollutants that enter in contact of your skin will cause some irritation, and then you see the skin inflamed. So that these are things that we can help when you reduce inflammation and you strengthen the skin barrier. And I agree with you, it's not like one way or another. Like obviously your lifestyle, your diet will help your skin to be stronger and more resilient, and also the products that you apply topically can help as well. So I would say that the combination of both is kind of the best strategy.
Right. And so one thing with anything you put onto your skin, because the assumption is, or the misconception that many people have, is that whatever you put into your skin can get through. And some people have the misconception that nothing can get through the skin. But the skin is a very delicate barrier that allows certain things through, right? And blocks others. And it's all based on the molecular weight or size of whatever you're putting on, right? So that means there are certain things that cannot get into your skin, which might be a good thing because there might be, toxins or pollutants or whatever. But there are other things that can very well go through, be it from other skincare products, the toxins and toxic ingredients in many of the skincare products, which is why, we basically stopped using most skincare products once we found out what they contain. But with that particular peptide that you've developed, that can indeed go through the skin's barrier and reach the target tissue, right? And you've tested that in the lab, you've told me last time we talked.
Yeah, that's correct. It's interesting to note that a lot of skincare products will contain peptides, but probably very few will actually penetrate because of the size. So as you mentioned, like there is a limit in terms of the molecular weight that can penetrate the skin. In our peptide is exactly on that limit, and because of the other charts that the peptide contains, it does, and the formulation itself, it does help the penetration. So I believe that we are one of the very few companies that can actually quantify and prove that the peptide penetrates. And we know that this peptide, has this effect on, senescent cells in reducing inflammation, and is very safe, doesn't cause any toxicity. So it is important that the peptide penetrates and reaches like the dermal layer. That's the layer that will be responsible for producing more collagen and gives like the firmness of the skin. And that's why we talk about this treatment as like an inside out treatment. It's not something that's only on the surface. It goes, to the deeper layers of the skin and it starts to repair from there. And this, comes all the way to the surface of your skin. So I think you are totally right. I think the skin was created as a barrier, as a physical barrier for a reason. Obviously, we don't want our skin exposed to things that, can be toxic to our body. And that's why we have, a problem with, the chemical sunscreens, right? Because they can actually penetrate and get your bloodstream. And in the long term, we don't know the impact of that. And that's why, I'd say the modern formulations and, like even our company, we're focused on a mineral sunscreen. A mineral sunscreen was supposed to just create like a physical barrier, won't penetrate, but, it still provides you that protection that is important, in terms of, aging, but also in terms of, obviously skin cancer and so on.
Right. Maybe let's talk about some of those toxins that are found in many, if not most, skincare and personal care products. Because I think most people don't realize, even if it's, fancy brands, even, as part of my review.
Sometimes they are the worst.
Yeah. It was actually a very expensive French product that I used to use, like a moisturizer. And then as part of my review, by the time the video is, this interview here is out, probably the review is going to be out too, and so you can look it up. But as part of that review writing, I looked at the product and the ingredients, and I'm like, holy moly, what did I put onto my skin? And paid a lot of money for it, you know?
Yeah.
And so what are some of the things that you see in skincare products that have the ability to penetrate the skin and cause damage, and to have the opposite effect? Really, it's not going to make you look any younger. It actually causes more inflammation and makes the situation even worse.
So there is a huge list of, like, the prohibited ingredients. There is a very good website. I don't know if you're familiar with this, the EWG, that's environmental.
Mm-hmm.
So over there, you can go and you can type the ingredient, and they will rate, the risk of the ingredient. So usually green is very low risk, and, red is, cancer-like risk. And you'll be surprised that a lot of the ingredients that are in some cosmetics, have a red score. So obviously there are the ones that are already, banned, like parabens, but you still can find products out there with parabens and other ingredients that can be like hormone disruptors.
Are they banned in the US too, or only in Europe?
I think probably in the US, they are not like banned in the US, more from, I would say, I don't know, a common knowledge perspective. Everyone knows about parabens, but in the US, you still can find products. So it's not that they are actually banned. But
in Europe, they are much better with actually banning certain ingredients, like, food colorings and those things. All of that is still fair game. I mean, yes, consumers become more educated, become more critical. But they are still, I would say, the majority of the population, unfortunately, looks only at the front of the label with all the marketing claims, and doesn't even bother. Because if you look at some of the ingredient lists, I mean, I can't even pronounce that stuff that's on there, and how would I know what that is unless I go to a web page, and type it in and see what.
It's really hard for the consumer. So and unfortunately there is very little transparency in many cases, but there are now those resources that can help. And so for OneSkin, for example, our first rule is like cause no damage, no toxicity. So we are very thoughtful on the list of ingredients that we put in our formula. We do all the tests in the lab, and it's really impressive to see when a product's not clean or have, or has those like crappy ingredients, the skin will start degenerating.
Oh, really?
And it's like, oh my goodness, people are putting this in their face. And some of them are those really expensive ones. And when a formulation is clean and it's made of, good ingredients, you see that the skin actually reacts like really well, and it starts even like to become thicker. So it's really impressive to see how those ingredients can actually impact the skin, at the cellular level. And for us, like, we make sure that we do all of those tests, and, we make sure that we're not causing any toxicity. But we definitely are aware of like how we can, avoid those ingredients in order to create the most efficacious and safe formulation.
Right. And not to derail and go too far down the rabbit hole here, but one of the main reasons why my wife and I stopped using most skincare products was because of their endocrine disrupting properties. Meaning, there are a lot of chemicals in those skincare products, and in other, not only skincare products, but personal care products in general, and many other products we use on a daily basis that mimic the sex hormone estrogen, right? If you're a man, then you can imagine that having too much estrogen is probably not a good thing, because we are, testosterone dominant, right? But even for women, having too much estrogen is not a good thing either. Can lead to all sorts of, cancers and stuff down the line, infertility. I never paid attention to this, but now whenever I hear someone is pregnant or wants to get pregnant, the amount of issues people have these days to conceive is just unbelievable. It's something that should be so simple. And, infertility, unfortunately, premature births, or babies that don't make it, etc. there is so many issues going on that all go back to hormonal health. And those endocrine disruptors, I believe, play a major role in all of those issues. And it starts with, and especially if you're, female, the amount of product many women put onto their body, from makeup to deodorants to, the toothpaste they use and everything in between, they're just loaded and loaded with endocrine disruptors. And then it's no surprise that, they end up with all of those issues because they just don't know. And so I think with skincare products in particular, it's such a low-hanging fruit to simply stop using what you're using today and to, move over to clean products. I think it will have a significant positive health impact, not only in how your skin looks. I mean, that's, good. Many, especially for women, very important, of course, and for some men. But it's systemic health that's really impacted by what you put onto your skin. And I think that cannot be overestimated.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And on the flip side, if you actually can find products that are enhancing, the skin health and function, you can also be corroborating, or strengthening your overall health. So I think that's why OneSkin, we talk about the importance of treating your skin as a whole, not only your face, neck and hands that is like more exposed. But if you think that, your skin is your largest organ and start to accumulate those damaged cells throughout your skin, and they start circulating inflammation, that inflammation that comes from your skin can actually, elevate your systemic levels of inflammation. So one of the studies that we are doing right now, which is really interesting, is testing how a topical cream, like the body cream that we developed, can actually decrease the levels of inflammation in your blood. So we have like the participants collecting blood before the treatment, and they use the product twice a day for 3 months. And then you collect blood again, and we measure the level of like cytokines related to inflammation. So again, I think, and we've seen already, the preliminary data already show like a very interesting trend in decreasing some of the main markers of inflammation. And those markers are correlated with like chronic diseases and cancer, even with mortality. So I think that's why I said that this should be a topic that men are interested as well, because, for example, you are obviously doing everything that you can to optimize your health. And if you learn, okay, this topical cream can actually, help me to decrease my levels of inflammation. So why not to add this on my routine, even if it's not like natural, but when you know that there is an impact and that there is a study behind, then it justifies, okay, now it's about health and it's not only about your appearance.
And it's again a very low hanging fruit, because it's not very non-invasive. All you have to do is put on a lotion, and I have it here. I mean, just to show the product as well. The stuff that I have been using here is the face, right, the body, and the eye cream. That's why I look so pretty. And there are a couple of things, especially with this one, I want to point out, because there is nothing more infuriating if you buy an expensive product and then you get to the end of it and there is still some in there and it's like worth, I don't know, $10 or whatever, and you can't get it out, right? And so I haven't even, I have to admit, the first one I got, I threw it out once I couldn't get it out anymore, and then later I read the documentation.
Oh, you learned
part of my review. And because I never read the documentation, that's really a bad habit of mine. But then I realized that if you just take this here, you can get this out, and this is, a soft pouch, and you can squeeze out the last drop. You can even cut it open if you wanted to, and get the last drop of product out of your cream. So you literally don't waste anything, and then you can get a refill, right? So you keep this, and you just refill this part, and you reduce plastic waste. I really like that. That was, unfortunately, I didn't, again, figure that out for the first one.
You're not the only one. It's impressive how many people don't read those instructions.
But I've been using now, I don't know, it's been a while. And again, also when you guys shipped me the first one, I only used it once a day because I didn't read the instructions. And then for the second one, I started using it twice a day. And I took some before and after pictures, and you can see a difference. I was skeptical. I'm like, sure, whatever, but you can see a difference. And my wife, every so often she says, this thing works. Your skin looks better. And it's sometimes very, hard to pinpoint because, your appearance is a little bit different every day depending on how you slept and many other factors.
Yeah.
And maybe after a workout, I have more redness than otherwise. But on average, if you look at my skin now versus how it was before, it just looks better. It's sometimes difficult to pinpoint what it is that looks better, but it's better, And so I'm like, okay, so it's not only the science that shows that it works, but I can actually see that it works. And that's really cool because very often with products, it's difficult to figure out if something is working or not, because especially if the change is happening on the inside, and that's why I like about OneSkin, because you can, it treats from the inside, but you can see it on the outside.
Yeah, no, for sure. And obviously, for different people, it will take like a certain amount of time to see the difference. So most of our customers, they see around after 4 weeks. From our clinical studies, after 6 weeks, and even, it gets better, it improves over time. After 12 weeks, 100% of the users saw an improvement in appearance and overall texture, smoothness. So as you said, we are not only, based on the data that we generate in the lab, but we also make sure to validate with clinical studies and to have a third party company validating and generating those clinical data, because in the end we want to make sure that our customers will perceive the difference themselves. And
so that peptide, you alluded to it before, but there is a potential to use that for other tissues than the skin, right? So there is maybe down the line a potential for a systemic treatment, for an injection, for a pill, for, I don't know, whatever it could be, to get that peptide into the body and, use it systemically. Is that right?
Exactly. So, the senescent cells that we were talking about, they don't accumulate only in our skin, they accumulate in all over our bodies, different tissues, and their accumulation, it's associated with several diseases. So our hope is that, not only this peptide, but we have other peptides that we are researching can be, tested for other applications. So right now we have a few peptides being tested for liver disease, and also for fertility. So as we know, obviously fertility is one of the main, symptoms that declines, so abruptly with aging. And so there is a very, significant impact there. And we believe that senescent cells is involved. Similar with other diseases that are related to inflammation, you can think of osteoarthritis. So ideally, what, scientists like us, what we envision is that in the future we'll have like a pill that will help your whole body to basically, to repair the damage more efficiently. So this will become like a systemic treatment. But until we get there, we needed to start treating specific conditions or diseases. So that's why we started, testing this peptide in other different models. And we are pretty excited about, the potential, application for this peptide. So eventually we can get to the more systemic intervention.
Right. Well, I just hope that people don't see this as a shortcut to mitigate some of the bad choices, they make every day.
Yeah,
but to
exactly.
use it really as a means to improve upon what you're physically capable of,
Yeah. It's not that you can be lazy. That's what everyone wants, right? I can be lazy, eat all the bad food, don't exercise, and take a pill, and then it's gonna, regenerate my body. No, that's not gonna happen. Even with the most advanced science in the world, it is, complementary. It's obviously complementary. It's a booster to your health. but your lifestyle will impact like 70% of your health. So this is a very important topic. Like people sometimes they lean too much on the genetics, right? Oh, someone has good genetics, someone has like bad genetics, but no, actually genetics impact only around like 20 to 30% on your health, and the remaining is your lifestyles, are your choices on a daily basis. So that it is what's going to determine how you're going to age, how you're going to be in 10, 20, 50 years from now.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that your the way you were born or your genes, they just load the gun, but it's a lifestyle that pulls the trigger. And there is I think a very important mechanism that probably also plays into what you're doing, and that is the whole concept of epigenetics. The layer above your DNA basically that determines what genes get activated and when and which don't. And and so even if you have certain genetic predispositions for certain diseases, doesn't mean you're going to get them, if you live your life accordingly. And on the flip side, just because you don't have the gene for Alzheimer's doesn't mean you're not going to get Alzheimer's if you consume a boatload of seed oils and do all the things that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating how, when we understand that we all of our cells, we have the same genome, and then obviously different tissues will have certain genes activated, will like determine like this will be a skin cell, this will be like a brain cell. So this is programmed when we are born and we develop, but then this continues to be influenced by our lifestyle. So the epigenetics is exactly that, how what we eat, how we live our lives impact the regulation of certain genes that will determine again how healthy or how more prone to disease you will be.
Yeah, cool, perfect. I think unless there is anything else I'd like to share, I think we can maybe mention a discount code, right? We're gonna have it down below in the description, but there is a code that you guys made available, so thank you very much. For anyone who sees this video, watches this video, and wants to use those products to look as good as I do, and to get to the same results. So check out the description for a code. Use that, and yeah. With that, is there anything else of importance? Anything that's coming up? We mentioned already the eye product that technically at the time of this recording wasn't out yet, but by the time you watch it, it will be.
Yeah.
Right?
This one was a really cool one because it has like the highest concentration of the peptides, because the skin around your area, your eyes is around 5 times thinner than the skin of the rest of your face. And in the way that we actually developed and tested this peptide, we cultured eyelid skins in the lab. So we're really using the best like skin type to, optimize the formulation and the efficacy for this product. So I'm super excited about this one. Obviously, because of the thinner layer of the skin, it tends to sag more, it tends to wrinkle more, so it does impact a lot of our appearance. So I think this will be a great one to add, again, with a very specific rationale behind the development of this product. So
yeah, and I can tell when it stays on a little bit long. I can actually still feel it a little bit. I put it on maybe 2 hours ago, and it's not it's not thick by any means, but you can tell it's a different consistency than the rest of it. And definitely, I think this one is probably the quote unquote thinnest one in terms of
for the whole body
weight, right? But otherwise, I used to be one of those people who hates anything on their skin. So that's why I didn't use sunscreen and stay in the shade instead, because I hated the feeling of having anything on my skin. And I don't want to sound like a beauty influencer, but this is very pleasant to put on. So it's super thin. It's more like in German we say body milk. It's very, very thin, almost milk-like substance. So it doesn't run off, obviously, but it's not super thick. It's not like putting beef tallow on your face. And so I think many people will like that, and it doesn't have any fragrance, because fragrances are bad too for the most part.
Yeah.
It doesn't smell like anything, so you don't, even if you're a dude, you're not gonna smell like roses when you use this product. So that's a plus, and all very very pleasant to use. Yeah, cool. All right. So with that, again, check out the description for the discount code for the full review. That goes into more details. Also has links to some of the studies and science that you mentioned throughout this video. And if there is any questions, is there any contact information you want to provide that I can add to the description in case people want to reach out? Is there any email address, or I don't know where they can find you?
I mean, yeah, I just would invite people either to subscribe to our newsletter on our website. We provide a lot of content around longevity in general. So we want to be that channel, that translate like the latest discoveries in longevity to consumers so you can take action. So I think there is a lot of great content for your community that's, interested in this kind of information. And our social media also, we share a lot there. And if you need any other, information, you can email us at support@oneskin.co.
Okay, cool. Perfect. I'll put all of the information on the description so people can take it from there. All right. Thank you very much, Karina. I appreciate it. Very good information. And hopefully some people will give this a try and then post some of the before and after pictures like I did. I think they'll be surprised how relatively quickly, they can see a difference. It's, again, not meant to replace proper lifestyle choices, but to support them and augment them. And I think if you do both, live a good life in terms of diet, sleep, exercise, stress management, no tobacco, and all of those things, and use products like OneSkin, I think you're gonna look your best and feel your best too. That's, I guess, it's just as important as how you look.
For
or maybe
sure.
more.
Yeah. Right. Thank you so much, Michael. Cool. This was great. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks so much as well.